The suffragettes faced all sorts of brutality and physical and emotional abuse. Abuse at home, abuse at work, abuse in the public spheres. They would be jeered.
Helen Pankhurst is the great-granddaughter of Emmeline Pankhurst, the steely leader of the suffragette movement in the early 1900s.
She was perceived as a rather genteel, beautiful, ladylike woman, and I think that was quite useful for the media perspective somehow, and for women kind of identifying with her. But clearly a dominant character, also very charismatic.
Never surrender. Never give up the fight.
But the film Suffragette is not just Emmeline's story. It depicts the foot soldiers of the movement.
You a suffragette, Mrs. Ellen?
Yes, but I consider myself more of a soldier, Mrs. Watts.
It really takes you through the experience of one woman, Maud, and her gradual transformation. So even until about halfway through the film, she's saying, I'm not a suffragette, but she gradually does become one, i.e. she becomes somebody who opens her eyes to the injustices all around her and starts to say enough is enough.
You're a mother, Maud. You're a wife. My wife. That's what you're meant to be.
Not just that anymore.
After decades of peaceful demonstrations failed to win British women the vote, the suffragettes began waging a guerrilla campaign against the establishment.
Vote for women!
Targeting shops, cutting communication lines, even bombing the Chancellor of the Exchequer's holiday house. The reaction was swift.
The police were allowed to be as brutal as they wanted to be, so kicked, punched, hair torn, and that was one way of trying to silence them, but they were not silenced, and as they continued not to be silenced, the level of brutality escalated, and that included initially imprisonment, and from imprisonment, because they responded with hunger striking, they were force-fed, and there was a lot of brutality.
It wasn't until 1918 that women first got the vote in Britain. Historians are divided over whether the tactics of the suffragettes worked.
Very definitely the suffragette movement was part of the reason why women eventually got the vote. More importantly, I would say, the suffragettes were part of the change in social attitudes and norms about what women could and couldn't do. 100 years later, if you look at so many figures in terms of political representation, for example, or in terms of equal rights, in terms of parenting, or in terms of the economic spheres, absolute legal everything, the figure's often something like, oh, we've got 20% women, or we've got 17% women, or maybe, if you're really lucky, we've got 30% women. So over 100 years, you know, I think that rate of pace has been pretty slow, really. And we need to get to that 50% and comfortably 50% in all spheres of work in order to have equality, to say that we're there.
Today, Helen Pankhurst is continuing her forebears' mission, working with women in the developing world.
I think we still need to have marches, we still need to have the kind of campaigns that the suffragettes were involved in, with being out on the streets. And the social media is a phenomenal opportunity to have voices come together to say, look, this has to change. I think it's fantastic that you have women using the visibility of the status, you know, from as actors, as pop stars, to galvanise change. I think that's fantastic.
And I think it is right that I am paid the same as my male counterparts. I think it is right that women be involved on my behalf in the policies and the decisions that will affect my life.
The feminist foot soldiers of today, exist in every single country. But above all else, the people I think of right now today are the women in Saudi Arabia who are, for the first time, able to stand in election there. And in many other countries, likewise, women fighting against physical abuse, personal abuse, to say, I'm not going to accept this, I'm not going to be a doormat. Things must change, and I will be part of that change. For me, those are amazing women.